Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our All Lines webinar geared to gaining valuable insight into Florida's risk and insurance marketplace. My name is Julie Fess and I am a governmental consultant here at Gunster Law. Today's webinar will be recorded and the link to the replay can be found on Gunster's YouTube channel or on gunster.com shortly after our session is over. Also, if you missed any of our previous webinars, you can find them at our gunster.com website. We have hosted Florida State Senator Jeff Brandis, Carrie Bond with Lloyd's of London, and Barry Gilway, who is the Citizens President and CEO. Today, we look forward to an engaging conversation, and I strongly encourage our live audience participants to ask questions. The audience will remain in listen-only mode. Please submit questions using the questions pane on the go-to webinar control panel. Your questions will be sent to the organizer directly without other attendees seeing them. Since our session will be in a conversational style, please send your questions anytime. There is no need to wait until the end. If you can't see your control panel, it may be collapsed. To expand it, click the orange arrow in the upper right-hand corner of the Grab tab. I will now turn this over to my colleague and co-host, Sha'Ron James, to introduce our guests and begin our conversation.
Thank you, Julie. Again, I am Sha'Ron James. I'm an attorney and government affairs consultant with Gunster, and we are excited to have with us Representative Fentrice Driskell. Welcome, Representative Driskell, to All Lines.
Thank you so much for having me, Sha'Ron and Julie. I'm glad to be here today.
So we're going to jump right in, I know that you've had a very impactful career so far. And so if you would, share with us a little bit about your background, your career path, and how you have made your mark so far on our state.
Well, thank you for the question. So I am a Florida native. I absolutely love our state. In fact, my birthday is March 3rd, which is the date that Florida became a state. I feel like it's destiny that I get to serve in the Florida House of Representatives now. But I was born in Polk County. I grew up in Lakeland, Florida, a product of Florida's public schools. My mom taught public school for over 35 years. My dad worked for Publix, where we all know shopping is a pleasure, and retired there some years ago. And they always instilled in my sisters and me the value and importance of getting a good quality education. And so we worked hard in school. That was my pathway forward in life. I was able to graduate top of my class in high school and leverage my public school education to attend Harvard, which was my dream school, where I was able to attend college and be the first Black student elected president of the student government. So it was just a phenomenal experience. I'll tell you though that actually before college, actually up until maybe like my junior year heading into senior year of high school, I thought I wanted to be an engineer. I knew some kids who were, in the grades ahead of me, and they were going to be engineers, and they were Black students who I looked up to. There weren't a ton of Black students in the AP and honors classes. But in 11th grade, I took AP Government and Economics, and it completely changed my life. I participated in a program known as Florida Girl State, and that taught me about Florida government at every level, and I was completely hooked. So I decided, honestly, at a young age that I wanted to study government. I wanted to learn more about it. I wanted to get a law degree because law really is the language of government and politics. So decided to attend Harvard, study government. Thereafter, I attended Georgetown University for law school. And then moved back home to Florida, to the state that had given so much to me, and just wanted to be a part of the community here. So I clerked with a federal judge over in Orlando, and then began my my career practicing as a business litigator in Tampa, where I've been practicing as a litigator for about 15, 16 years now. In 2018, though, I decided to run for office. I felt like at the time, America, one of the things that's really troubling to me about America right now is the deep polarization that I feel politically on either side. And I'm someone who is very much a consensus builder. I believe that our best days as a state and as a country are ahead of us, not behind us. And that's the sort of conversation and transformational change that I want to be a part of. At the time that I ran, the Florida House of Representatives was comprised of fewer than 25% women, which is totally out of balance when you look at the population of women here in the state of Florida. We're just, I think, roughly half, or maybe even slightly more than half. So I felt like I had something to offer, and a unique voice and a skill set as an attorney that had prepared me for this job, not to mention a passion for service and for government. So decided to run in 2018. where I've represented Florida's 63rd district in North Tampa. Since then, serve as policy chair for the Florida House Democratic Caucus, and was recently elected unanimously by my peers to serve as the Florida House Democratic Leader Designate. Technically, it's Speaker Designate, but we're in the minority right now, so it's tended to be thought of as Minority Leader. So I'm very excited about that. I'll be the first Black woman in Florida to hold that post, and yeah, I feel like we've got some good days ahead.
Oh, that's awesome. So many firsts. I love what you said, that law is the language of government, and it definitely is. So there's a new accomplishment that I just found out about today that I'd love to hear more about. The fact that you were named a New Deal leader for our country, and the New Deal organization is a group of pro-growth progressives. So talk to me a little bit about the notion of or this concept of balancing pro-growth business ideals, economic development with progressive values. That's very interesting. I'm sure our audience would love to hear more about that.
That's right. And, and I'll tell you, one of my philosophies in governing is that I want every Floridian to have the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. And in order for that to be a possibility, for families to have a pathway forward, for young people to feel like they have a future here in Florida and they don't have to leave our state, and all the resources that we invest in them in terms of college scholarships, just having that leave our state, I mean, that means that we need to have a good economy. So I'm one who believes that when we give families a pathway to prosperity, when we're able to invest in our small businesses, when we're able to have a regulatory structure that keeps business and competition fair, but then gets out of the way so that our economy can flourish, that is the sort of Florida that I think people want to be a part of, and that businesses want to be a part of. And, it encourages them to want to move to our state and set up headquarters here, et cetera, or operations here. That's important. And as a Democrat, I'm proud to be able to talk about that. I think too often people look at party as just a way to keep folks confined to a box, or there are these labels like Democrats are just tax and spend. I feel like that could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth, because there are nuances to policy. So I am very much one who believes that it's possible to hold progressive values and to also be in support of a strong economy, because in fact, it is a strong economy that allows you to achieve some of those social goals that you want, including greater investments in public education, including protecting our water sources, keeping it clean, protecting our environment, and things of that nature.
And so I think you've touched on some, but what do you consider one of the greatest challenges impacting our state, particularly in your role as a state representative?
Gosh, so many things right now as we're emerging from the pandemic. I'll tell you that, and I know we're going to probably talk about health insurance a little bit later in the program, but one of the things that's been most concerning to me, information that's been emerging from committee weeks up in Tallahassee, is just how hard Floridians were hit by the pandemic. And I see it every day here in my district. We still have people who ask us for help with unemployment claims. We processed hundreds and hundreds of unemployment claims trying to get people their benefits from the state of Florida. But we're also learning that there are hundreds of thousands of Floridians who are newly eligible for Medicaid. And that is a program that already is taxed. Florida is one of the few states that has not expanded Medicaid and accepted more federal dollars to expand that program and cover the Floridians who need access to high quality and affordable health care the most. And so I think that, this session, I really want to see us tackle this healthcare issue, because people are hurting. And if families are hurting, then our kids can't learn, they can't grow. It becomes a ripple effect that we will see the bad ramifications from for years to come.
So early on, you talked about the values that your parents instilled in you and your sisters. So clearly, you've been an impactful leader. Who else has impacted your life from a leadership standpoint? Any Floridians, any national leaders that you really look to in terms of kind of shaping who you are as a leader?
Yes, there are many, but I would like to pause here and mention two. The first is Senator Arthenia Joyner. So Senator Joyner is from Lakeland, just like me. She's a Black woman just like me. She's a lawyer just like me. I mean, I guess I should be saying just like her, because she really is one who paved the way during her time in service in the legislature. She actually was the first Black woman to serve as Senate Democratic leader in the Florida Senate. And so it feels just wonderful to me that I'm kind of following in her footsteps and doing that over in the House. She has become a great mentor to me, and I look to her for sage advice and guidance on many issues as I navigate the legislative process and just life in general. And then the second, of course, would be Stacey Abrams. Stacey, before she ran for governor of Georgia, served as the Democratic minority leader in the Georgia House of Representatives. And so, I love reading her books and anything that she puts out so that I can understand, how she was able to grow as a leader and really lead her peers and get them, to have trust and confidence in the direction she was trying to take them. So those are two who have been pivotal to me.
Those are two outstanding leaders. So just shifting back a little bit to our state, and this is a great hypothetical, one that I think a lot of folks, policymakers, electeds ponder and wish would actually happen. But the question is, if we had an extra $1 billion in our state budget, and you had the authority, this is all hypothetical, we know, to decide how that $1 billion would be spent, how would you spend it?
Education. I would invest it in our public education system, hands down. That response came to me immediately without hesitation. And so in recent years, we saw that we increased starting salaries for teachers in the state of Florida, which was a good move. That was a move in the right direction. The problem with that is then it started to cause wage compression, where you have veteran teachers who have been in the field for years, dedicating their lives to service and educating future generations of Floridians, who now were just making slightly more than someone who was just starting out. And so it sends the wrong message to our veteran teachers. I think that our public education system has been under attack for so many years, and the joy of teaching has been slowly kind of drained from the process with all the high stakes testing. I'm glad to see that we're starting to pivot away from that. But there are many ways that our public school system has been under-resourced, and increasing teacher pay for veteran teachers, veteran educators, I guess I should say, and also for support staff, I think would go a long way towards improving morale. But there's also a business case for it, in that we want to be attracting the top talent for these roles. And in order to be competitive, you have to pay people what they're worth. So if I had an additional $1 billion, I would use it in our public school system, absolutely.
Great. And so I know education is something that's really important to you personally, but also from a policy standpoint. Aside from education, I know social justice issues are important to you, affordable housing, the environment. So what are some of the other things that kind of keep you up at night? Just again, hypothetically thinking about the time that you spend really trying to develop solutions, policy solutions for all Floridians. Is there anything else that really stands out to you as a great challenge?
Yeah, there are many. The challenges are myriad, but there are a few that have been on my mind lately. Last year we were able to make some great headway on a police reform bill, House Bill 7051, that I was honored to carry, and we were able to get it passed unanimously. And to me, it was such an important thing for us to do, to try to build transparency and accountability between the law enforcement community and between communities of color. But then, America continues to go through strife with respect to this. The Ahmaud Arbery trial has been going on. And granted, that wasn't an active law enforcement officer who was involved in that, but just the repetitive pattern of unarmed Black people being killed, I feel like is something that is, it absolutely has gripped our nation's hearts. And so I'm always thinking about how can we bridge those gaps? How can we improve those relations? Because Florida is a very diverse state, and it is growing. The census showed that we had great growth from 2010 to 2020, and I want us to continue in that direction. And so trying to solve for some of those societal issues keeps me up. I think a lot about our environment and whether Florida has done enough to be resilient when it comes to climate change. We haven't. We're starting to wake up. You're starting to see the legislature pass initiatives and invest funding and resources into programs to mitigate against climate change, and that's a step in the right direction, but there's so much more that we have to do. One small way I'm trying to move the needle forward on that is trying to get a pilot program started on food waste recycling. Currently, about 15 to 20% of the material that is in our landfills is comprised of food waste. And once it's there, you can't do anything with it. It releases methane gas, which is one of the most potent greenhouse gases. So are there ways where we can divert that away from our landfills and go through either aerobic digestion, which is composting, or anaerobic recycling, so that we can capture those materials and use it for clean energy? Those are things that I think about, what is impacting Florida's future for years to come. So those are a couple of the big ones.
Those are really important. And as you know, All Lines is a webinar series that we have here at Gunster, really focused on the risk and insurance marketplace in Florida. And so in addition to a number of the other committees that you serve on, you also serve on the House Banking and Insurance Subcommittee for the House. And so we want to dive into a few risk and insurance related issues and just get your thoughts and your ideas about how the condition of our current insurance marketplace and some of the public policy issues that we face as a state. So Julie, you want to talk a little bit about some of the insurance issues?
Yes. And we'll start off with property insurance, but I know, we'll also get into the health insurance as well. So last month in the House Banking and Insurance Committee, the head of the Division of Insurance Fraud discussed the lack of resources needed to make a dent in the property insurance fraud arena. Do you have any thoughts on that, or ways that we can protect consumers? Because there's a lot of, scams out there, and you see a lot of consumers falling victim to it. Do you have any ideas how to, besides putting more money into it, which would be helpful, are there any other ways that we can prevent that from happening?
Right, and I'm glad you mentioned this. And when Sha'Ron asked a question about issues that keep me up at night, I started to mention the property insurance market, but I knew that we were going to get into it in the program. And our property insurance market is in a very bad way right now. And it seems to me that it's been tough to understand what the best solutions would be. So much of what we're seeing, it's my understanding, at least a big contributing factor are these fraudulent roof claims, and where you have contractors, some of whom are unscrupulous. The unscrupulous ones are the bad actors, rather, and where they might entice a consumer to file a claim for a new roof when they didn't need one. Maybe there was a hailstorm in the area, or maybe it was adjacent to the area, and then sometimes a contractor might show up and say, hey, there was a hailstorm, do you want a new roof? These sorts of practices, unfortunately, are causing the market to get more expensive and causing the market to get less competitive, and is driving up costs. So one of the things that I think we should do is make sure that we are getting information into the hands of consumers and into the homes of consumers so that they can avoid these fraudulent claims. I think that sometimes what can happen in a neighborhood, one neighbor sees a neighbor get a free roof, and how'd you do that? And information kind of spreads. So we need to be able to battle those disinformation campaigns. So that's just one way. And then, of course, making sure that we're cracking down on the bad actors. To me, that seems to be one of the best ways that we can tackle this problem.
Good answer. All right. So Barry Gilway, the CEO of Citizens Property Insurance, has talked in your committee, in the Bank Insurance Committee, about their growth, their exponential growth. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any? I mean, how do you keep that growth down? Because it's getting out of control, and it's becoming, a government now property insurance company. Do you have any thoughts on how to maybe tackle that?
That's right. Citizens was never intended to compete with the private insurance companies. And so what's happened is the property insurance market has worsened. Citizens has become that insurer of not just last resort, but it feels like first resort for a lot of Floridians. I think we're at the stage where we're going to have to go through a depopulation with Citizens. But if and as we do that, we have to make sure that homeowners have a soft place to land, which is why we're going to have to see what the effects of SB 90 were, the property insurance bill that passed in the 2021 legislative session. That bill was imperfect. But now that it has been passed and signed into law, I think everyone is waiting with anticipation to see whether or not it can actually correct some of these challenges that we're seeing in the market. Because Citizens, it's overpopulated. Citizens doesn't want to have as many policies as it has right now, and we to right the ship and make some corrections into the market so that things can flow much better.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk a little bit about health insurance. Do you have some thoughts on that and what the current state is? And you want to talk a little bit about the health insurance and how we are with that?
Yes, absolutely. So, last year, actually, there were really wonderful bipartisan efforts to extend Medicaid benefits to some families who needed it most, particularly with respect to postpartum Medicaid benefits. The Speaker of the House, Chris Sprowls, and Representative Camilla Brown worked very hard on that. And it is extending those benefits from 2 months postpartum to 12 months postpartum, which is huge just for, to keep mothers healthy. When the mothers are healthier, their babies are healthier. That's the future of our state and our society. So it's really quite important. And I think part of the way that we were able to get there is that we were able to kind of like back down from our more partisan corners and use more inclusive language about it, use extend rather than expand, et cetera. So I would love to see us have those sorts of conversations now that we know that there are so many more Floridians who are Medicaid eligible. It is going to come at some cost, but there are federal resources available to assist with that. And we need to be willing to make the hard choices so that we are helping the Floridians who are most in need.
Sorry, there's some hard choices there for sure. Sha'Ron, did you have any other questions? I'll kind of transition out of the insurance part if you had some others.
No, those were my only insurance questions. I'm burning with other questions, but
Okay. I wouldn't hear too hard on all of them. We'd stay here all day, wouldn't we?
I know. It's really good when you get a chance to talk with another policy wonk. People don't really get a chance to really talk to other policy geeks. So I'm grateful to have this conversation with Rep. Driskell. So I know we're all gearing up for special session, and COVID-19 has really pulled the covers back on a lot of issues that were impacting our state before, but have really impacted us even more. You mentioned earlier issues with unemployment compensation. You've mentioned issues related to, healthcare. So as we gear up for a special session, are there any thoughts you have related to the pandemic and how our state has responded well and or not so well? And any thoughts about us going into special session?
Yes, thank you for the question. I mean, many thoughts. I think that Florida has not had the best response to the pandemic. I was shocked, frankly, at the lack of the governor's leadership on this. We watched as particularly our mayors and county commissioners, the local governments made the tough choices to require people to wear masks, to practice social distancing, the sort of behaviors that public health officials recommend to stop the spread. And we started to see our numbers go down as people followed those instructions. And yet somehow, it wasn't our local governments that got the credit for it. The state got the credit for it, but the state's response was really too hands-off, too laissez-faire, I think. But now we're all very glad, right, that the vaccines have become widely available. It looks like our economy is moving in a more positive direction as we become more open. There are, again, some big challenges with property insurance and healthcare and other things, but it is a good feeling. I think Floridians are happy that we are opening up. But then we had this call for a special session that nobody asked for, that's very unpopular with businesses. In fact, I would go so far as to say that this is anti-business, trying to curtail a business's authority to require its employees to be vaccinated or to be tested on a regular basis for COVID-19. I think that because our world has opened much, sometimes People forget that we are in a pandemic. They forget that there are variants. It was just a month or two ago, everybody was terrified of the Delta variant, and it was a far more aggressive strain. So we want to make sure, I want to make sure that we do the right things that helps to keep our state healthy, prosperous, and safe. I think a healthy Florida is a more prosperous Florida. So this call for special session is just, it's very frustrating to me that we are taking time away from the regular business of the legislature to address this. It seems to me to be politically motivated insofar as I cannot find a good logical and reasonable basis for this to be put forth on as policy. And then we've seen this as a trend. Other states have tried this or are trying this. It recently was tried in Texas, which also has a very conservative governor, and it was a political stunt there. It failed. So it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But I can tell you that the business leaders that I've talked to, they are not in favor of this. They feel that their hands are being tied. They feel that they are the ones who are, helping to get Florida back to work and to keep our economy moving strong. And so for the governor to make a move like this, it just puts them on their heels unnecessarily.
Thank you for that. So we've talked a lot about the state's challenges, existing policy challenges, current challenges from a policy and political standpoint. What are some of the legislative or kind of policy successes that you've seen in your time in the legislature? And you mentioned the bipartisan effort to expand Medicaid for new mothers. Are there any other items, any other things that you'd like to highlight as successes?
Well, there was one actually during my first term, and that was reform on assignment of benefits. That was an insurance issue. And it was very interesting for me as an attorney who I actually don't practice in the insurance field, but in business litigation, I have some familiarity with the concepts. So very interesting as a freshman member on insurance and banking when this reform was coming through, and to be in a position to help educate my colleagues in my caucus on this who also were unfamiliar with the subject matter. And I really love how that issue gained bipartisan support because it was something important that we needed to do for our property market. So that's one that always sticks out as a highlight for me from my first year. And then in terms more recently, I'd mentioned the police reform bill. I mean, that was a really big one. We had 0 no votes on those bills in the House and the Senate. And I thought it was an important message to send to Floridians while everybody had been hurting after the murder of George Floyd, that in Florida, we want to do better. So I felt like that was a good one where we were able to deliver strongly on a promise. And then in terms of just more bipartisanship that I think is transformative, last session, we did a just transformational overhaul of Florida's workforce system, which I'm very excited about it, trying to help get young people in particular plugged into career and technical education, if that is their pathway forward, but just really trying to implement policies and reforms that is preparing Florida's workforce for the future. I'm sure many of you have heard from your clients about how companies are experiencing workforce shortages now, and some of them were experiencing it before COVID, and now COVID has just made it worse. So I'm hopeful to see what that legislation will do in terms of keeping Florida competitive nationally in terms of having a good, well-prepared and well-educated workforce.
Great. Any questions, Julie?
No, I mean, the only thing that I would ask you on the insurance side, just one more, and it was, so last year the PIP bill was vetoed by the governor, and I see it's come back again this year. You have any thoughts? I mean, that was passed by both the House and the Senate, and I don't think anybody was surprised that the governor vetoed it, but you have any thoughts on what may happen this year with PIP? I mean, are they going to be able to persuade the governor to sign it, or are there any, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was frankly surprised to see that bill again, because with the governor having vetoed it, and that was just a few months ago, really, it was just over the summer that happened. I was surprised to see it back so quickly. And because it was such an effort last year, I thought that you know, the efforts might be focused elsewhere, like just really continuing to focus on the property insurance market. So I don't know. That is one of Palace intrigue, what is going to happen with the PIP reform bill. When I first started in the legislature, it was one where you had both like the trial lawyers and the insurance industry on, you know, on the same page with respect to it, and then things kind of fell apart last year. So I don't know what's going to happen with the PIP reform bill this session. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think anyone does. That's one of
I
those
was
that we're
about to
just.
say, I think everyone has the same answer. We're
Right.
all waiting and seeing.
Yes.
So from a legislative priority standpoint, just kind of forward, kind of looking forward a couple of months, we come back in January for full session and been in committee weeks. If you had a crystal ball, are there any priority areas or things that you definitely think we'll see again or see for the first time?
Sure. Well, one of the things that you alluded to, of course, was fraud. And so I've noticed that in a number of different committees, we're starting to get presentations on fraud, particularly consumer-facing fraud. So I anticipate that's going to be a big theme this legislative session, particularly with respect to insurance, the insurance industry. So we can expect to see that. You know, of course, we had in the interim between the last legislative session and this one, there was the Surfside condominium collapse. I think we can expect to see some legislation around that as well. Redistricting is the hottest ticket in town though, and everybody is anxious to see what those maps will look like. We'll have new maps for our congressional and state legislative seats at the end of this legislative session. So those are just a few that I think everyone will be keeping their eyes on, and some of the trends that I'm starting to see.
And always with an eye towards the budget.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
The budget. My goodness.
That small
So-
little thing. Yes.
So what's next for you, Representative Driskell? Again, I think it's apparent from everyone listening that you have a very bright future. So what are your plans? What's next for you?
Right. Well, I mentioned in my intro that I was recently elected Democratic Speaker designate. It's a lot of designates, but basically it means that I'm next to next in line to lead my caucus in the House. And so that's not until 2024, 2026. So I'm grateful to have this runway. There's a lot of work to do in terms of preparing for that. And I very much would like to be able to, you know, honor that and serve out that term. So you know, that carries me at least a good 5 years into the future, and beyond that, who knows? I mean, I don't mean that tongue in cheek, but I think what happens in politics, things move fast. You never know what things are going to look like. So I don't know, but I know that I do enjoy serving in the House. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's one of the best things I've ever done, and I look forward to the opportunity to lead my caucus.
That's great. Is there anything else you'd like to share?
Well, you know, I just thank you so much for inviting me on your show and for taking an interest in the work that I do and in my perspective. As I mentioned before, I'm a litigator, but not an insurance litigator. This is an area of policy that I've taken a liking to and have worked very hard to try to learn and distinguish myself on. So I appreciate that you even cared to ask about my perspective. You've also heard me mention a couple of times, you know, I just want to see every Floridian have the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe. I think that that's what I'm called to do as a legislator. That's my charge, and I work very hard and take it very seriously and try to be thoughtful as I evaluate the bills that come before me. But yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to share that perspective with you and your viewers as well. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you so much for your service. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So Julie, you want to close us out?
Sure. We just want to tell everybody thank you so much and keep a lookout. We will possibly have another webinar in January. We don't know who will be on our show yet, but please, you know, keep a lookout for that. And Representative Driskell, thank you so much. It was great to have you on. And I guess with that, I'll let everyone go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Julie.